make it harder for them to arrest these people that the illegal alien adjacent organizations want. And because they're not in strict compliance with it, we want to extend it for another 3 years. Oh, guess what happens in 3 years? Yeah, Trump's not the president anymore, give or take. First, we find that the illegals have shown by a preponderance of the evidence that 22 out of the 26 illegals were arrested without a warrant. So the parties had one settlement conference over which the undersigned, the same judge, signed this, and they continued to negotiate, and ultimately they executed the settlement agreement on November 30th, 2021. Who is the president? Joe Biden. It's the same scam. A Biden judge now blocking ICE arrests. This is a battle that's happening all across the country. Can the president deploy National Guard troops? Can ICE agents conduct arrests? The Supreme Court is going to have to come in and settle a lot of this, but this decision came down out of the Eastern Division of the Northern District of Illinois, drafted by this judge, a Joe Biden judge, who was appointed in 2023, brand new on the scene, and is now saying you cannot conduct arrests of illegals unless they're conducted properly according to terms that he feels are appropriate in the case. In 2018, 5 individual plaintiffs, okay, so all of these people, Margarito Castañón Nava, Miguel Cortez Torres, Guillermo Hernandez, and all of them are here. John Doe doesn't want to use his official, name, Eric Rivera Sales, and all of them, okay? 2018, they don't want to get deported, they sue. So the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights and Organized Communities Against Deportations, some NGOs or some hack, agencies, they filed a class action lawsuit against Trump's homeland back in 2018 and against ICE. They say, you can't arrest us. You need a warrant to arrest us for immigration purposes. So in other words, they get special privileges. Okay. Most arrests in Arizona or in the country really are done without a warrant. Okay. You have probable cause to conduct the arrest. You're urinating in public. They say, oh, you're peeing in public. You can't do that here in Scottsdale. You're going to jail. So they arrest you and take you into custody and process you for a crime. You need a warrant. Same with a DUI. Okay. Unless I refuse to give you my blood sample or my breath sample, they go get a warrant to pull that out of you. Okay. So most people in this country, if you've ever been arrested, are probably arrested without a warrant. But illegal aliens are going to get little due process premium here. Okay. Because they're better than us. And so they need, if you have probable cause that they're in this country illegally and you can conduct an arrest to deport them, we're going to see they get special privileges, because how dare you do that to an illegal alien? So they come through, they say, we're going to have this limitation. Now, after the court denied ICE and their motion to dismiss back in 18, the parties agreed to settle the case. So there was a settlement that came in and granted approval, saying that we have a settlement agreement. ICE agreed that there would be several obligations in this region: Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, Missouri, and Kentucky. The agreement had a 3-year term and it was set to expire on May 12, 2025, unless enforcement provisions triggered its extension. So now it's like a private contract, essentially. Okay. These illegal aliens, I'm presuming, and these, coalitions against deportations, illegal alien facilitators, they settle with the government, and then the government is bound by their terms. And the judges approve it, and the judges kind of force them into these things. We saw this back in 2020. They did this same scam with the election rules. Remember, people would sue. The Retired Alliance of Michigan or whatever, many of Mark Elias's affiliated groups would sue. They would say, grandmas can't go vote because COVID. So we need to have them all register online and waive their signature requirements in Wisconsin and blah, blah, blah. And the Democrat secretaries of state would be sued by Democrat entities. They would settle the terms, and then the election rules would change because a judge would approve it and mandate it and say, issue the new guidance, secretary. You have to go issue new guidance to everybody and go conduct elections this way. All the scam, because the legislature sets the terms of the elections. And so they usurp their power out from under them. Same type of thing is happening here. You've got an agreement between illegal alien adjacent individuals and the government. And now they're going to say this has to be extended in perpetuity because you can't conduct these arrests. So the parties agree. They were able to resolve any disputes about ICE and their compliance during the first 2.5 years of its term. However, shortly after the second Trump administration began, their lawyers got multiple reports from the illegal aliens. They said, ICE arrested us, and they arrested us without warrants in violation of our prior settlement agreement. After trying without success to resolve their disputes, they then sued again. They filed another motion to enforce our settlement agreement. Then they supplemented their filings, and they say that ICE has engaged in repeated material violations and that 26 of our illegal alien class members were arrested without a warrant. Now, to be clear, they don't don't challenge ICE's authority to make targeted arrests with administrative arrest warrants, nor do they challenge the authority of ICE to arrest foreign nationals with judicial warrants. But they say that ICE agents, they assert that they had valid warrants to arrest roughly half the people and that they properly executed warrantless arrests for the remainder. So they're saying, well, ICE is actually complying with some. You need warrants, whether it's an administrative warrant or a judicial warrant, to conduct this arrest. Now, ICE has another process for this that we'll get into, but they say that's the problem. Now, they filed a motion pursuant to rules to modify the agreement and to declare a bunch of things. They say they're not complying, repeated violations, instruct them not to circumvent the requirements. You have to have a warrant and you cannot write in the field. Okay, so the ICE agents are writing warrants, like these administrative warrants, in the field, and they can't do that, saying that ICE's obligations are now terminated and we want you to extend the term of the agreement by 3 years. Okay, so make it harder for them to arrest these people that the illegal alien adjacent organizations want, and because they're not in strict compliance with it, we want to extend it for another 3 years. Oh, guess what happens in 3 years? Yeah, Trump's not the president anymore, give or take. So ICE in response says we're not violating the agreement. Actually, we're following the agreement to the T. And by the way, the agreement already expired at the time of June 11th, right? It was scheduled to expire, so it's already over and you can't extend it. We're in October now. Finally, the judge says on September 26th, there was a notice of an additional violation. And they're saying that Trump is doing Operation Midway Blitz. There's immigration enforcement happening all over the place, and we're just totally freaked out. Now, the judge tells us, Biden judge appointed like 2 years ago. After considering the parties' submissions, here's what the court finds. First, we find that the illegals have shown by a preponderance of the evidence that 22 out of the 26 illegals were arrested without a warrant. And as I said before, most people are arrested without a warrant. You just need probable cause and you can facilitate that arrest. Now, the court orders ICE to provide relief to those individuals under the terms of the agreements, pay their attorney fees because they didn't have a proper warrant that they incurred. So all these illegal alien groups get paid. And second, the court in its discretion finds that they have met their burden. And we are going to extend this agreement, which makes it harder to arrest the illegals. But the court does find that the modifications are not properly tailored. So I'm not going to extend it 3 years. I'm just going to extend it to February 2nd, which corresponds between the number of days that ICE was not complying and the memo. And it's not going to be 3 years because that's kind of a windfall for you to extend it beyond its expiration date. So that's going to move it to February 2nd, 26. The court will also adjust the reporting requirements so that ICE now reports to us and the judge is in charge of proper deportations that the executive branch runs. And by the way, these illegal aliens, they can already go file a petition for habeas corpus. They can already go and say, I'm being wrongfully detained. They're not losing those rights at all. All this is meant to do is to stop the actual enforcement, which is why they filed them this way, so that ICE has to go talk to some Democrat judge who is never going to grant warrants for these things or go through an administrative process that's much more cumbersome and burdensome that practically makes it difficult to actually effectuate the detentions. Now, in the sections below, judge is going to give us a bunch of nonsense. We know what immigration law is. If you're illegal, get out of the country. That's the law. Get out. Now, here's the procedural history of the lawsuit. Again, there's a lot going on here. There were settlement negotiations. Court denied ICE's motion, so ICE actually settled this. No, they began settlement negotiations mid-2020. So it is the same scam. So the parties had one settlement conference over which the undersigned, the same judge, signed this. And they continued to negotiate. And ultimately, they executed the settlement agreement on November 30th, 2021. Who is the president? Joe Biden. It's the same scam. So Democrat entities sue blue secretaries of state, blue judges, grant the settlement. We have new election terms that bypass the entire legislative branch. It's unconstitutional. They did it everywhere in 2020. They just ran the same scam here. Yeah, just have these illegal alien deportation coalitions sue and we'll just settle it. The Biden people will settle it, which says you can't arrest anybody. So now Trump has to be bound by the terms of that settlement agreement just to enforce the law. Judge Pallmeyer granted preliminary approval of this agreement December 1, 2021. Then he certified a settlement class of all current and future persons arrested without a warrant for a civil violation of immigration law in ICE Chicago field office's area of responsibility. So in other words, it's a judicial takeover. They've now commandeered enforcement by tying it to due process and a warrant requirement for illegal aliens. She then granted the motion in February 2022. This is very fair and reasonable. So the Biden administration comes in, reverse everything that Trump did, and then settles this in a way that is devastating to America. And the blue judges all approve it and say, perfect, we're going to hold this in perpetuity for forever. And Congress didn't pass anything. This isn't democracy at all. This is a judicial takeover in conjunction with a complicit executive branch, and it's attempting to bind us into the future, and it is. So here's their settlement agreement. We don't need to read the particulars, but there it is. Training, compliance, remedies for class members. It's like what the judges are doing now by certifying classes and issuing nationwide injunctions. They basically did that back then. Here's a class of everybody. You get all these privileges, and your attorney's fees are going to get paid for if they violate you, and we're going to extend this indefinitely. The parties agree that the settlement agreement was effective during the Biden years and that the term would have expired in 2025, May, but they dispute the status, and so they want to postpone it, and they go through the agreement, and the agreement is just obviously a rigged agreement between Biden and illegal alien groups. So it's going to be a ridiculous agreement, and they're trying to bind Trump to it. Now, their motion to enforce, they're going to give us a big laundry list, a parade of horribles. They say, we were all subjected to illegal arrests. And most of this is just that. This judge is just going to cry over every one of these illegals. Francisco de la Torre had a restaurant. Somebody else had a restaurant. I showed up. Big sob story. Video footage. Arrested this dude. You're gone. Here's another one. They have authority to briefly detain. Evidence shows employees feel like they were not free to leave. Then they filled out forms after the arrest that were submitted to the immigration courts. Although these documented that they were foreign nationals in the U.S. illegally, it doesn't provide probable cause that they were likely to flee before a warrant could be obtained. And so that was part of the terms of the agreement. Okay, you need probable cause to conduct the arrest, or actually you need a warrant, which is ridiculous, to conduct an arrest. You need some other approval to do that arrest. If you have people who are here illegally, just, oh, you're here illegally. Just like if you're doing anything else. If you're standing there urinating in public, you're breaking the law. If you're in our country illegally, you're breaking the law. Urinating in public, they just put the cuffs on you and take you to jail. Then you can see a judge after that. But a cop looks at you, identifies indicia that you're breaking the law. How is that any different than an illegal alien? Many of whom are also urinating in the streets. But they, pursuant to the terms of the settlement, you need a special warrant. You need special privileges to go and actually conduct and touch an illegal because they're better than us. So here, such a reading would say this is a warrantless arrest and you're not allowed to do that. Now, none of the class members or their forms contain facts that they even had probable cause to believe that they were likely to escape. So there were really two conditions. One, you need a warrant, or you could conduct an arrest if they were going to escape before you could get a warrant. So without a warrant, if you had reasonable likelihood that they would escape before a warrant could be obtained. There was another exception. Supplemental forms are immaterial. So any of the paperwork that you're doing is not good enough. And it just goes on. So they walk us through every one of these. Okay. Senin Becerra Hernandez. Okay. I know. Terrible. This person, Julio Noriega. Okay. We got it. Here's another one for this dude. And they say, well, the documents were prepared on scene and you can't do that either. And so if you're preparing your warrants in the field, then that's also a problem. In his declaration, some ICE field officer, Director Olson, he explained how warrants were prepared in the field. Prior to the onset of the operation, ICE identified targets. And according to other plaintiffs, Tom Homan, the border czar, he said, yeah, we're going to make arrests. And the remaining arguments, they say, are meritless. ICE offers two more supports saying we can do this, but he says, no, you can't do it. An ICE officer can arrest a foreign national without a warrant so long as he's got probable cause. So you have to have a warrant, but you can do it without a warrant so long as an officer has probable cause the person is in violation of immigration law and is likely to escape before a warrant can be obtained for his arrest. Okay. So that's like the thing that makes it a lot more difficult. They added this in. Okay. You cannot pick them up if they're not going to flee or something. You need probable cause and they're going to escape. Otherwise, you got to go get, a much more substantive warrant, which makes it basically difficult, right? You see somebody, you see probable cause to go get them. I got to go get a warrant for it. Now you've lost that opportunity. So finally, ICE comes back and they say, nope, you got to follow through the settlement. And under the settlement, you lack authority to do it. Again, more sob stories. Bernardino Ronda Marines, Abel Orozco Ortega is also having a Jacques Noel Hernandez Rojas, Herbiarto, Selvin Call, Jose, the claim of this person. Okay, they're all, I know, poor, aggrieved, illegal aliens. We got it. And so they want this enforcement and they want attorney's fees for all of those illegals. And they say everything was fine. Things were fine under the agreement until Trump came in. Then ICE failed to comply. They started utilizing their field warrants to effectuate arrests of our protected class illegals. So in its response, ICE says, we're allowed to do this, that there is no doubt that they say that they know that you were going to violate the agreement, but you're not allowed to do that. And so we're getting to the conclusion of this. The court is going to extend the agreement, but not for the 3 years until February 2nd. The court further orders ICE to reissue the broadcast broadcast to all ICE officers nationwide, okay? You can only make arrests if, without a warrant, if you think that they're going to run away from you. And if they make those arrests, they're not going to run away from you. Just, cite them and release them and issue them a notice to appear, and then they'll come appear and you don't have to pick them up at all, kind of a thing. Or don't go after them. Just only go pick up the people that you can get proper paperwork for before you identify that they're in the country illegally, making the arrest very unlikely to happen. So finally, it's our understanding that you can keep us updated about warrantless arrests and administrative warrants that are not issued in conjunction with notices to appear, the NTAs, just like a cite and release type of a thing. Rather than picking them up, you cite an illegal alien, you're going to come to court, right? Oh yeah, I'll be there. Okay. And then they never do. Therefore, the court orders ICE to produce to the plaintiffs a list, everybody who was arrested and subjected to your abuse. ICE shall file a certification, and within 10 business days, you shall give all the information. And for the reasons stated above, we're going to enforce the terms of Biden's rigged settlement agreement against all of America in perpetuity, at least until next year.